The 90s were a decade for radical advertisement, things that were sure to unsettle you while simultaneously making you hungry. A weird combination of emotions made for a fantastic time to be alive and witness one of the most outrageous eras of advertising. Here on Strange History, I like to take a look at mascots and media pop culture phenomena that has long been lost to time but somehow still tattooed in the back of our minds and hopefully instilled the same weird combination of emotions that these commercials did. That's a lot of words that I just said. However, typically when these mascots are lost to time, they're somewhat celebrated by their niche fan bases and even sometimes the companies that created them. However, for Crazy Craving, or the Craver, or the Honeycomb Craver, that wasn't entirely the case. Today we're going to be taking a look at the Honeycomb cereal mascot, a horrifying abomination that God left unfinished and one that the world and his creators want you to forget. It's a weird one, I'll tell you that much.
Can't resist that crazy, man!
Sweet, crunchy, sweet! Honeycomb, me want honeycomb!
The marketing for Honeycomb cereal, much like other 90s cereals, is pretty strange, but to accurately set the scene, we gotta start at the beginning with a little cowboy known as the Honeycomb Kid. The Honeycomb Kid commercials aired during the 1960s and served as the cereal's original mascot. Honeycomb Kid was your average all-American hero, a cowboy who would save the day by taking shots of dry, sugary cereal to the dome while doing crazy stunts like riding dolphins to save a kid trapped on a bridge, or blowing an avalanche back to where it came from with nothing but his comically large chest cavity. These TV spots would run until the 1970s until they were eventually swapped out for a new marketing campaign called the Honeycomb Hideout. The Honeycomb Hideout was a series of commercials surrounding a group of kids hanging out in a clubhouse with the same name. At first they would quietly sing the jingle and show off the shitty prizes they got, like a vinyl record or a latex glove, I don't know, the 70s. Until eventually the Honeycomb lore would expand and a random adult, celebrity, or even the Incredible Hulk would show up asking for a big cereal, and the kids would know just how to help them. You see, back then Honeycomb cereal took a lot of pride in the size of their pieces, much like the guy in your group who's overcompensating for something. However, the trade-off would be that it would turn the roof of your mouth into Tiananmen Square. The adults would measure the pieces and go, yep, that's a big fucking cereal, alright, and then they'd sing the jingle.
I've spent 80% of my time working on this. That's why we were in Paris.
These ads would run through the 70s and 80s, eventually throwing a robot in the mix, cause, you know, the future. And after this, post-cereal brands would begin to get a bit more outrageous with their marketing, especially with the 90s fast approaching. So they did what any company with an established brand would do, and they pulled from the past. They decided to go back to the Honeycomb Kid, but this time having him take different forms like a consumerist shapeshifter. The first was a Wheaties-like ad campaign in the 80s, with the Honeycomb Kid being average little Timmies from the suburbs like you and me, doing gymnastics and jackknifes on a full stomach. After this, following the turn of the decade, the Honeycomb Kid would become an adventurer on a quest for the 3 key secrets to honeycomb cereal, sort of giving these ad spots its own lore/story that kids would tune into to find out what happens next. And unfortunately, these are lost to time with the exception of one that I could find, which was the Honeycomb Kid on a Temple Run-like quest for the 3rd secret to honeycomb. He recollects that the 1st secret is crunch, the 2nd being shape, and the 3rd being presented in a Harambe chocolate melting in the pot-like way. Eventually revealed in a future installment that the 3rd secret was taste. Because of course. It's funny because my guess was that it would be whatever they put in this that gives me a sore throat. I might be allergic to something in here. And then he would vanish, never to be heard from again. But while the Honeycomb Kid would finally be laid to rest, his body cremated and his ashes lay on his mother's mantle, a new nightmare was emerging from the shadows. The insatiable hunger for honeycomb cereal was growing past a point of no return, slowly enveloping our bodies, our souls, and our stomachs, giving birth to a new era of outrageous marketing. With the new decade into full effect at this point, and technology showing no signs of slowing down, advertising agencies and brands were beginning to find new ways to market their product in bigger and more bombastic ways, even borrowing from the biggest names in the industry for things like this. This would allow a new mascot to take shape in the form of a furry creature known as Crazy Craving, the Craver, or the Honeycomb Craver. The anthropomorphization of hunger, as he's described, is basically what happens when a person gets so hungry at the thought of a specific sugary cereal that their eyes bulge out of their heads, their mouths become as big as an elevator shaft, and they instantaneously hit Kaioken puberty and go on a ravenous killing spree. That's not what his Wikipedia page says, because it barely says anything. Crazy Craving is actively being erased from history. A quick Google search will net you a few results, specifically from Reddit, and the general consensus is typically, oh, I completely forgot about this guy, or thanks for reawakening my nightmares, kind stranger. I don't know if people talk on Reddit. But in my opinion, the Craver, he's just misunderstood. He was a goofy and very era-appropriate character. We see this sort of out-of-the-box visuals with a lot of advertising from the 90s and the 2000s. In Crazy Craving, he was no different. But who the hell created him? Well, typically when I do research for these videos, it's usually pretty easy to find materials surrounding the subject matter, but not with Crazy Craving, let me tell you. There was virtually no information on this creature. I mean, you go to Post Cereal's website today, and they seemingly omit him from Honeycomb Cereal's history. It's almost as if they want us to forget. So I did the obvious, I sent them an email. Hello there. I'm working on a project about the history surrounding the Honeycomb mascot from the 90s, Crazy Craving. I noticed there's no information regarding his inception, and was hoping you could either divulge some information I'm missing, or point me in the right direction. I eagerly awaited a response, and a few days later, I got one. Thank you for contacting us. It was nice to hear from you. We are sorry to share that we do not have the information you are seeking. Post Cereal has incurred various ownership changes over the years, and due to this, we have lost some historical information. We apologize for this inconvenience.
Thanks again, and we wish you all the best.
I'm sorry, what? So through Post's various changing of hands, they just seemingly lost all information regarding his inception? You know, I'm not gonna lie, this made me a little sad because even though he's a beacon of consumerism and a spooky one at that, he plagued all of our television sets as kids, so he deserves to be immortalized in the MCU, the Marketing Cinematic Universe. Alright, so with all that out of the way, here's what I could find regarding his inception with the trusty Wayback Machine. He was created by a little advertising company known as Grey Advertising in 1995. Originally, he was an actual puppet that blended early CGI and practical effects, which made for some pretty unsettling results. The puppet was made by one of the biggest names in the business, Industrial Light and Magic, who are more famously known for their work on indie films such as Jurassic Park and Star Wars. Humble beginnings, I guess. However, as brands started to move to a more digital future, the Craver would get a facelift. The actual puppet would be sent to Topix Animation Studios to completely rework the character for the 3D world, and the Craver would become the face of Honeycomb Cereal throughout the 90s and 2000s. But what about his voice? Well, the hairy little sociopath was voiced by Frank Sims, who is a seasoned voiceover artist providing voices for various commercials throughout the 90s, most notably being the voice of the original Chug Jug, the Kool-Aid Man. You've probably even heard his voice in various Rockstar Games titles as well. And during my attempt at uncovering the truth behind the Crazy Craving conspiracy, I actually had the pleasure of sitting down with Frank Sims himself and discussing his time as the Craver.
They showed me a picture of him at a recording studio, Pullman Sound in New York City, and it was Grey Advertising. And I'd be in a room with a stupid mic and some foam. And besides the engineer, there might have been 3 people there. So there's one guy, I think, who, I don't know if you'd call him the copywriter. He has that dream of the Craver in his mind, first and foremost. And then the art director serves him as she sees fit. So he's probably going, honeycomb, honeycomb, me want honeycomb. And of course, there have been many meetings where they've agreed on these lines. Honeycomb, honeycomb, me want honeycomb. And there's no divergence, I guarantee you. Heads will roll if these aren't the lines.
Honeycomb, honeycomb, me want honeycomb. Honeycomb, honeycomb, me want honeycomb.
My chief function was to perform this copywriter's lines just the way he could envision the character. So like, yeah, he'd close his eyes or whatever he did and say, yeah, that's the guy. You know, I need more energy, less energy. Or he might even had something in his mind. He might say, make it sound more like Brooklyn-y. I would get all the shades of emotion, and I would do it a lot.
He even let me in on his feelings towards the sugary foods he's given so much character to over the years. I gotta ask, do you like honeycomb cereal?
Okay, I'll tell you the deal. I'm a kind of a real healthy guy, and although I get my sugar from Haagen-Dazs chocolate and peanut butter ice cream, I pretty much avoid sugar at every turn. Occasionally I do get an urge. I'll say, I remember when I was a kid and I used to have cereal. What kind of cereal did I like? And as an adult, I would say I'm gonna go to shredded wheat.
That's another thing too. It's like, when you're nostalgic about these brands, and then when you go to the grocery store, you turn that box over and you're like, Jesus Christ, I can't eat this.
I can't eat this. I did a thing with a thing called The Big Story. So we were in New York, and so we went down to literally a red brick wall downtown, blah, blah, blah. So at the end of the spot, it's funny, she said, would you like to try some Kool-Aid?
Bottoms up.
Obviously, I didn't spit it out. And it didn't taste poisonous. It just tasted, this isn't drinkable. And think about all those years I sold that crap and made all that money, sold that sugar. Can you imagine?
Frank would provide the voice of the Craver all throughout his runtime, which, to be honest, wasn't very long compared to most memorable mascots. And that's not to say that Post didn't put their little persona anywhere they could any chance they got, because while he was short-lived, during that lifespan he would get multiple commercials that most of us remember to this day. He even had his face plastered on a snowboard that you could win by buying Honeycomb cereal, which I may have made a less than stellar financial decision in purchasing one for myself. But I mean, come on, it's a piece of history. And a tax write-off. I, for one, remember playing Mini Golf Open on candystand.com and being stuck on hole 8 because he fucking died. Can somebody check his pulse? I need to get out of this cereal bowl. Crazy Craving would stick around from 1995 all the way up until around 2005 when he would slowly be phased out for a new, arguably weirder marketing campaign called Big Mouths Wanted. I'm sure you've seen these commercials before. A kid walks into the high school, he's got a mouth the size of North Dakota, and all of a sudden he's like the chosen one because he's able to eat honeycomb cereal and then he transmits it to the other kids, so they have to live with these horrible disfigurements.
Show us what you're made of.
Big Mouths Wanted.
Although I feel like we did get a Crazy Craving spiritual successor in the form of Bernard the B-Boy, but I'll let my B-Boy, Andrew Miller, the Crazy Craving aficionado, explain.
Bernard the B-Boy, in many ways, had the same body as Crazy Craving, but none of the soul and none of the flavor because they changed their recipe to fit this healthy lifestyle of the new commercials. He was essentially just a regular boy who was raised by the bees, as many people are, and moved and acted in a sporadic manner, much like a bee. The commercials would follow him in his zany antics, watching him try to live a normal life and failing because ultimately, in his heart, he's just a bee and trying to have sex with Markiplier's girlfriend. The TV spots were filmed like a Jane Goodall style documentary, starting with him being studied and experimented on. He then goes home with his caretaker and she enrolls him in school and tries to get him to participate in classic childhood traditions such as picture day, trick-or-treating, falling in love, and getting bullied for being a berry bee bitch. Now, if you ask me, these commercials are 1,000 times more unsettling than anything Crazy Craving ever did. I mean, Bernard's over here having epileptic seizures into bowls of cereal and rolling his eyes around like he's that bitch from The Exorcist. The TV spots, which started in 2007, would advertise the website bboy.org, which would give you more insight into Bernard's lore. I'm sure you can tell by now, but Honeycomb took their lore very seriously, but could never really commit to anything long-term, as sadly, Bernard would be taken out back and told to look at the rabbits, Lenny, when they realized they couldn't deal with him anymore. And the TV spots would end around 2010 with Bernard meeting one of his own kind. A heartwarming story, but later Bernard would be unceremoniously replaced by Terry Crews. You heard me right, the loud man from Old Spice would be the new B-Boy with his Be Big campaign. Going back to those roots they had solidified all those years ago, that Honeycomb cereal truly is the biggest cereal in town. I'll always miss staring into those soulless eyes of the Craver, though. I still sometimes see them in my dreams.
So, that's the story of Crazy Craving, a horrifying, misunderstood relic of the past, whose commercials will forever serve as somewhat of a time capsule for the most insane eras of advertising we've ever had. From being the face of a brand, to being nightmare fuel for anybody who doesn't care to dig any deeper. You know, Crazy Craving was actually the entire reason I started doing these videos, because looking at his character design made me take a harder look at a lot of character designs from that era, and made me really realize how fucking stupid a lot of them were. I mean, we could show these commercials to aliens, and they could perfectly surmise human culture with 3 simple words. Me want honeycomb. I don't know how that makes sense. Me want honeycomb. That makes sense. Thanks for watching, everybody.